The dusty border town was buzzing when Luke Carson, a quiet rancher known for keeping to himself, arrived with not one, but two Apache brides. Whispers spread through the saloon like wildfire. Men snickered, women scoffed, and old-timers shook their heads. "Guess he's lost his mind," one man muttered, his voice dripping with scorn. To them, Apache women were outsiders, not fit for a respectable home. Luke didn't respond to their laughter. He wasn't a man of many words, but he carried himself with an iron calm. The sisters walked beside him with grace, their dark hair braided neatly, their steps strong despite the stares piercing through them. At the general store, the owner sneered. "Rough day when a man can't find himself a proper wife." The crowd laughed. Luke's jaw tightened, but the sisters simply lowered their eyes. They had known humiliation before, it was nothing new. Yet what the crowd didn't know was that Luke hadn't chosen them out of pity or desperation. He had seen something in their strength, something unspoken but powerful. As he loaded supplies onto his wagon, the sisters exchanged a quiet look. They could endure the insults for now. But soon, these people would learn that appearances were only the surface of a much deeper truth. Back at the Carson ranch, the whispers of town faded, replaced by the sound of cattle lowing and wind whistling through the plains. Luke worked from dawn to dusk, and the sisters, Ayanna and Tala, threw themselves into ranch life with surprising skill. They mended fences, cooked hearty meals, and even rode horses with a natural ease. The ranch hands, who at first shared the town's skepticism, found themselves impressed. Ayanna's sharp eye caught things others missed: stray cattle, weak boards in the barn, signs of an approaching storm. Tala had a gentleness with animals that made even the most stubborn horses calm. Still, at night, Luke could see the shadow in their eyes. They carried stories untold, burdens heavier than any ranch chore. He didn't pry, he wasn't a man to force words, but he gave them space, respect, and something they had rarely known before: safety. In town, however, the laughter only grew louder. Rumors spread that Luke had taken savages as wives because no white woman would have him. They said the sisters were mute, incapable of understanding civilized life. One evening, after another cruel remark in town, Luke's patience began to fray. He was ready to defend them with fists if he had to. But the sisters stopped him with a calm hand on his arm. "Not yet," Ayanna whispered softly. "Let them laugh." Something in her tone hinted at a secret Luke had not yet discovered. The annual town harvest festival drew crowds from every nearby settlement. Luke had no intention of going, but Tala surprised him by asking, "Take us there." Her eyes carried determination. When they arrived, the stares were sharper than ever. Women clutched their children close, men chuckled under their breath. The laughter rose when the sisters attempted to buy fabric from a stall. "Can't speak English, can they?" one man mocked loudly. Luke's hands clenched into fists, but before he could step forward, Ayanna lifted her chin. With calm precision, she turned toward the man and spoke, clear, flawless English. "I speak better than you. And perhaps better than most here." The crowd froze. The mocking smiles vanished. For a moment, silence spread across the square like wildfire. Tala added, her voice steady and articulate, "We are not what you think. We are daughters, women, and workers just like anyone here. But we are also more. We are educated, and we choose to stand with him." She nodded toward Luke. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some stared in disbelief, others turned away, ashamed. Luke's heart surged with pride, not just for their courage but for the way they stood with dignity, refusing to bow to ignorance. That night, whispers followed them again, but this time the tone was different, curiosity instead of ridicule. Back on the ranch, Luke finally asked the question that had lingered since the festival. "Where did you learn to speak so well?" The sisters shared their story by the firelight. Years before, missionaries had taken them in, teaching them to read, write, and speak English fluently. But when war tensions rose, they were cast out, caught between two worlds, accepted by neither. "We are not ashamed of who we are," Ayanna said firmly. "But we will not let them chain us with ignorance either." Luke listened silently, his respect for them deepening. He realized they had endured far more than the town could ever guess, and instead of bitterness, they carried wisdom and resilience. Days later, when a cattle dispute arose with a neighboring rancher, the sisters stood beside Luke as he argued his case. The rival laughed, ready to dismiss them, until Tala spoke with sharp precision, citing land agreements and legal terms that silenced the men instantly. From that day, Luke wasn't the only one who saw their worth. The town slowly began to realize that these women were not burdens, they were assets, partners, and equal to any rancher's wife. But acceptance did not come without cost. The sisters knew their lives would always be a balance between two worlds. Still, they chose this path, together. Months passed, and the Carson ranch thrived like never before. Word spread of the rancher and his remarkable wives who worked as hard as any man and spoke with wisdom that silenced mockery. Though prejudice lingered in corners, no one dared laugh anymore. Not after seeing Ayanna calmly debate the town judge, or Tala teaching children, both Apache and settler alike, to read beneath the shade of an oak tree. One afternoon, Luke stood watching them from the porch, pride swelling in his chest. Once, he had thought himself alone, destined to carry the ranch's burdens in silence. Now, he had partners, women who had transformed laughter into respect, ignorance into awe. At the next festival, the sisters walked through town not as objects of ridicule but as figures of quiet admiration. And when someone asked how they had endured such scorn, Tala simply said, "We let truth speak louder than hate." Luke reached for their hands, grateful beyond words. He had married them in defiance of gossip, but what he gained was far more than love. Together, they had carved out a place where pride and dignity stood taller than prejudice. The town would never forget the day the rancher's Apache brides spoke perfect English, and silenced a world of doubt.